Hi, Cold Warrior 78 here again. Back out in the woods, but the discussion for the day is going to be a little bit different. The discussion for the day is, what does it take to stop a bullet? This discussion started actually at a gun show a couple of weeks ago, and I'd like to thank the woman, I don't know what her name is, who spoke to my wife to help give her a different perspective on prepping and some of those kind of things. But is involved in a discussion at the gun show about what does it take to stop a bullet, my experience being with the engineering manuals we had at the end of the Vietnam War, and fixed positions, those kind of things. And the gentleman I was talking to was an Iraqi war vet. He's used to wearing the body armor. He has a different perspective on some things, and led me to have the discussion with a couple of other people, one of who said that he had seen a video on YouTube that took a .30 caliber ammo can, which are about 4 inches wide, packed it full of sand, shot at it, and then it stopped the .308. And that got me thinking that I didn't have the video, I hadn't seen it, but that would be a very handy dimension because it's effectively the space between two 2x4s. Pack that with sand and see if it will in fact stop a bullet. Normally I don't do a lot of these, let's shoot stuff kind of videos because everybody else is doing it. But I don't remember seeing a lot of other people focusing on, from a defensive standpoint, what can you do to protect yourself from gunfire? What'll stop a bullet? Behind me is the one of the test units that I've got. Let me show you what we're talking about. As I pan down a little bit. All right. Now this is a very simple box. Okay, it's made of 3/4 inch plywood on both sides. This one is 2x4. Okay, a 2x4 in here. So everybody knows the thickness. The 2x4 is 3.5 inches wide. Okay, it's not actually 4 inches. So 2x4, 3/4 inches of plywood on either side, screwed together, top and bottom, and filled with sand. Now I chose sand because it's an identifiable substance. You could fill it with dirt, but your dirt in your yard is not going to be the same as the dirt in my yard. Dirt doesn't have a scientific or engineering definition. Sand, on the other hand, does. So for uniformity's sake, I decided to go with sand. Also, I didn't just pour sand into it. I used a grain scoop, a feed scoop, and about every couple inches, I took a 2x4 and I pounded down on the sand, tamped it as tightly as I can get in there, so that is tightly packed sand inside that very secure, very heavy box. I also have a second box made with not a 2x4 but a 2x6, so it's actually about that much wider. So I'm going to take both of those today, take them out to a place where I can shoot, and put a couple rounds into them and see how they stack up. Now here's the advantage to how this thing can benefit you. Let me take a look at this piece again. Now that's heavy. The 2x4 piece, this 2x4 unit has about 40 pounds of sand in it. The 2x6 piece has 70 or so pounds of sand in it. Combined with the heavy 2x and 3/4 inch plywood construction, those are not light units. However, that being said, this is the kind of thing, if it works, and we'll find out in a little bit here, if this works, this is something that is accessible by pretty much anybody that has any kind of skill with tools, has access to a Home Depot or a Lowe's or any kind of home improvement store. You can make it out of scrap materials if you can find them. I actually scored this 3/4 inch plywood from my local Habitat for Humanity because a company that made shipping containers was donating a bunch of plywood. Weird sizes, couldn't use it for anything else, but I could cut it up and make a couple of these kind of things out of it. So again, cost-effective ballistic protection for your home, perhaps. consider in a without rule of law situation, the average suburban house is not made to stop a bullet. But if you have some units like this in strategic places around the house, in a bedroom for example, you could make it a strong room, which is actually would defeat gunfire from a handheld. I'm going to shoot it with a .308, which is about as big as you're going to typically see anybody carrying. You could also potentially stack up units like this in front of your door, or actually behind your door on the inside where people can't see it. So if a drive-by or somebody tries to shoot through your door and get in, this will stop it. Again, assuming it works. So there are a lot of beneficial applications to this around. If you have a homestead out in the woods, great. You can do a lot of different things. But even if you're in a suburban situation, you can take either 2x4 construction or 2x6 construction, whichever is going to work, and build it into a lot of things that you would tend to have anyway. Planters, for example, things that hold up decorative stuff. Shelf units, the bottom of which is typically a cabinet nobody ever gets into anyway. So why not use it for some, get some protection value out of it. Alrighty, so let's go off and see what this actually does with a range. Before we start shooting, there's one thing I wanted to talk about, and that's the fill that I put into the containers. I said sand is a uniform product, and effectively it is. Here's what you're looking for, though. In a scenario where you're trying to stop a bullet, you want to pack the sand as tightly as you can so there's no extra airspace. There's no way for the particles to move out of the way of the bullet. Now, you start to think, hey, if I put in water or some sort of fluid, that would obviously fill up the space, and it would. But if you've ever seen videos of shooting a bottle or a can of Coca-Cola or something like that, you can see the explosive effect hydraulics has on that kind of environment. In a liquid, the bullet that comes into the, let's say a 2-liter soda bottle, that force is going to be applied to every square inch of the bottle, top, bottom, sides, equally. That's the way hydraulics works, and that's the reason why they explode so nicely, is you are magnifying effectively that even the .22 rimfire that hits that thing, that energy is applied all around it, finds the weakest part, typically a seam or maybe the cap, boom, you get this beautiful little explosion. Not good for armor, okay? Solids react completely differently than liquids do. Solids will absorb that impact of the bullet and transmit the force and energy in a very localized area, typically not more than a couple of inches around the entry point. So what you want for a ballistic protection environment is you want a substance that can pack tightly, remove all of the empty space in there, so that when the bullet enters through whatever skin, plywood, or whatever you have on the outside, that this medium does not move out of the way easily. That every grain this thing tries to get to, it has to literally wedge itself up or destroy it to get to the next one. Now, gravel has been suggested by a couple of people. My concern with gravel is if it's not small enough, you got a lot of empty space in there. And the bullet could wiggle its way through and potentially have a lot more energy left over in any given thickness of material. If you did something like maybe crushed rock that you see on the roads that has the rock dust with it to fill in all those gaps, that might work. I'm not going to try that, but you're welcome to try something like that. Dirt, like I said, from your yard could work. It depends on what it's made out of. My yard is layers of sand and clay and sand and clay, laid down centuries ago. It's not very good soil, quite frankly. If you could mix it all together, I've been told that a clay and a sand together makes a really nice loam. I don't know, I'm not a farmer. I do know that the red clay that's on the surface of the ground around here is not structurally stable, first off. It gets wet, it expands. When it dries, it shrinks again. So it's lousy to build with in a protection thing like this. Clay has very, very, very fine particles. And if you kept it dry, I could see that maybe it would work. But if you get it wet, then you're going to have the same problem that if you've ever seen, you know, the ballistic gelatin dummies. Well, that's kind of the second generation of that concept. They used to shoot it into wet clay. And you still can see some of those videos out there. And the wet clay has that beautiful kind of splash opening as the round burrows through it, because the water allows, it lubricates the particles and allows that clay to expand and take all that hydraulic, that dynamic energy. It looks pretty on the pictures, not good for what you want to protect yourself. So dry, small particle size, and tightly packed in there. So to me, sand just makes sense. Plus, it's fairly inexpensive if you have to go buy it. The bags in Home Depot were like $4.50 for a 50-pound bag. If you have a river like I do, hey, you know, go dig some sand out of the river. Whatever you can do. If you've got soil you want to test, I'd say test it first before you use it. But as long as you tamp it down so that it's flat, it's right on top of each other, there's no empty spaces, could work. You do your own tests. Okay? Okay, well, we're deep in the woods again. We're going to shoot those two barriers with a 308 and a 5.56. Now, this is my 308 of choice. It's an old Savage 99. For those of you who don't know what that is, go look it up. It's an excellent weapon. Has a rotary magazine, so you can actually use standard Spitzer pointed bullets, which is what a 308 typically uses. So we're going to do that first. Let me pan around to the targets. And zoom in on those things. Zoom. There we go. So as I said before, that is a 2x4 with 3/4 inch plywood on either side. That's on the, as you're looking at it on the right hand side, the 6-inch is on the left hand side. Okay, earplugs are in, range is hot. Here we go. Take off the safety. And that was into the 6-inch. Right into the 4-inch. There we go. Rounds are out. Weapon is open. And let's go see how we did. Alright, so here we're looking at the results, and the front of the target doesn't seem particularly substantive. You can see a little hole. That's the 30 caliber entry hole. The sand has filled in behind it, so you're not seeing a tremendous amount of damage at this end. Okay, there's your entry. It's already filled with sand. There's your entry over here, filled with sand. The dramatic answer is on the back. You can see the exit chamber for the 2x4. That's 2 fingers wide by about 2 fingers wide. Bullet exited. We have shrapnel back here from the plywood, and the bullet is in the ground somewhere over here. Now on the 2x6, all right, you can see there's a little bit of a crack, but the bullet did not exit. Get another angle on this. All right. So the bullet got trapped inside there. So that's interesting results. So 2x4's width worth of sand, not quite enough. 2x6, just barely enough. Okay, so we're back at the firing line. Let me zoom in on the targets again. This time we're going to use a 5.56. That's become a very standard round in today's environment. Alright, so hearing protectors on. Okay, loading the first round. Range is hot. All right, empty magazine. Okay, weapon is empty, range is safe. Let's go see. Alrighty, this is the 5.56 entry. Obviously a smaller hole here and here. As with the 7.62, the sand has already filled in the hole. The good news is on the back. As you can see, there's no exit damage on either of the barriers. This was what was already here from the 7.62. So the good news is a 2x4 with sand, 2x4's width worth of packed sand will stop a NATO 5.56, and certainly the 2x6 size will do the same. So that's the good news. I'm going to shoot a couple more rounds just for fun, and then we'll get back to you. Alright, so for you gun aficionados, these are the two weapons that were used. On the right is a Ruger 5.56. It's got a Vortex red dot on it. On the left is my Savage 99 and .308 caliber. It's got my grandfather's old Weaver 4X T-post sight. That's my standard deer hunting rifle when I have to shoot at a reasonable distance. Most of the time in this kind of brush I'm using a 30-30, so it doesn't get used as much as I would like it to. Okay, here we are back at the barriers. Now you'll notice there's a second round of 5.56 right next to the first one. Okay, right down here. 1, 2. Now let's look at what happened in the back. If you remember, the first time there was no exit. Second time, when you put two bullets that close to each other, the second round exited. Okay, and the spalling pattern is almost the same as it was for the 7.62. So that's an interesting piece of data if you were planning on using a 2x4 kind of arrangement. Not such a good idea. Alright, here we are back down at the barriers again. You can see an additional 5.56, two additional 5.56 holes, and an additional 308 hole from the original two that I fired. On the back side, we have the original crack, which was here, and now some spalling off on that side. The indication certainly is that additional gunfire, additional rounds impacting in the same neighborhood is going to cause a traumatic failure of that panel. Also want to point out, for those of you who don't think there's a lot of power in these rounds, look at the amount of sand it's trailing out of here. It's being blasted out each time this is being hit. And you can actually see a bit of a space now. Those boards were almost watertight. I did not caulk them for this test. I was going to caulk them for the construction that I did. But you can see there's about at least a 1/16, almost an 1/8 in the middle there, gap where sand is being shot out every time a round impacts it now. So while it did stop a bullet, this has stopped 5 bullets at this point. failure is imminent if you keep hitting it in the same area. Alright, so we're back in the driveway now. Put the guns away. Going to clean them in a little bit. So let's summarize everything that we've gone through. In summary, the two barriers were made from 2x4 and 2x6 respectively. They were skinned with 3/4 inch plywood, and sand was packed in between those two pieces of plywood all the way up. Let's show you what we have. This is a 6-inch hole from a 308 or 762, another 762, 556, 556, 556. When you look at the back of it, the original scale that was starting to come off right here had kind of closed up when I picked it up, but there was spalling from the second 308 round. Nothing from the 556 that we put in a couple extras. So not bad, but not completely acceptable. On the 4-inch, which is here, 308 here, 556, 3 of them right there. The 308 blew out on its first round, so I didn't put any more into it. The 556s, when you got 2 of them within about an inch of each other, the second one blew out the back. Now I want you to take a look at the spalling that's around these pieces of plywood. This doesn't actually have an exit wound, so to speak. The bullet's probably still inside there, but it flexed it so much that that wood came off and became a ballistic problem. In both of these cases, we have exits where the bullets went all the way through. Obviously, the 4-inch thickness, 4-inch nominal, is not thick enough by itself to be a good bullet stopper. And even the 6-inch, with multiple hits in the same neighborhood, is starting to get questionable. My guess, and this is from years of looking at how the military's designed armor and protective systems, is some sort of secondary layer is going to be required. Might be as simple as putting in a piece of tin, roofing metal in between the 2 layers of sand in the 6-inch. It might be taking the 4-inch, skinning it with something like maybe 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch plywood, and then putting a second either 2x or 4x spacer on the back with some more sand. I'm pretty certain that just a little bit of barrier on the inside of that sand would have been enough to stop, at least on the 6-inch, stop and contain all those rounds. So we're not definitively saying it can work, because obviously we've had some issues. We're not definitively saying it can't work. Conceptually, obviously the way it sits today, it didn't work. But I think there are some simple solutions to this. We're going to poke around with this idea, and I'll talk to some folks and come up with some ideas, and we'll change it and do it again. So until then, sorry we didn't come up with a cheap and easy way to fortify your house, but we're working on it. Sandbags are always a good idea, and they're cheap. Buy them by the pallet, fill them wherever you got to. There's a reason why the Army's been using sandbags for 100 and something years. So there you go. So anyway, this is Cold Warrior 78 saying get out in the woods, have a good time.